Millionaire left his pregnant wife on the street years later. She bought his company. In a quiet suburb on the outskirts of Chicago, a seemingly ordinary life unraveled in the most extraordinary way. A millionaire, consumed by greed and ambition, cast aside his pregnant wife on a stormy night, leaving her with nothing but heartbreak. Years later, their paths would cross again in the most unpredictable twist of fate. She returned, a formidable force, determined not just to seek vengeance, but to reclaim her destiny. In a world where fortunes rise and crumble at a moment's notice, one woman dared to turn betrayal into triumph. This is her story, a saga of love, abandonment, and ultimate redemption. Alexandra Bennett never expected her life to become a cautionary tale. Growing up in a humble home in Omaha, Nebraska, she dreamed of better days, ones filled with security and love. Raised by her grandparents after a car accident claimed her parents' lives, Alexandra learned the values of hard work, compassion, and resilience from an early age. She spent summers helping her grandfather in his repair shop, learning how to fix everything from squeaky bikes to broken hearts. The quiet, Midwestern evenings were filled with stories of family, legacy, and the power of perseverance, shaping Alexandra into a woman who believed in forging her own fate. At 19, she received a scholarship to the University of Chicago, one of the proudest moments of her life. The campus overwhelmed her with its grandeur, imposing Gothic architecture, a reputation for academic rigor, and a sense of boundless possibility. She arrived with little more than a few suitcases, a modest bank account, and an unshakable determination to prove herself. It was there she caught the eye of Adrian Marshall, the man who would first sweep her off her feet, then later become her greatest sorrow. Adrian Marshall was the golden boy on campus. 6'2", with wavy brown hair and a confident stride, he seemed to carry the world in the palm of his hand. The son of a wealthy entrepreneur, Adrian never knew hardship. While others scrambled for part-time jobs, he spent his evenings at exclusive downtown clubs, forging connections that would later catapult his entrepreneurial ventures into the stratosphere. Still, there was something about Alexandra, her quiet strength and warmth, that drew him in. Their worlds collided at a charity gala sponsored by the economics department. Adrian, always the center of attention, was regaling a small group of donors with his ambitious vision for a tech startup. Alexandra, nervous about mingling with the high rollers, was ushered over by a professor who believed in her potential. At first glance, they seemed an unlikely pair. Yet when Adrian locked eyes with Alexandra, something sparked. Over the hum of champagne flutes and whispered deals, they found each other in a private conversation about life, love, and the dreams they both held close to their hearts. A whirlwind courtship followed. Night stretched into dawn as they walked along Lake Michigan, exchanging secrets about their pasts and hopes for the future. Adrian, for once, felt understood not for his money, but for who he was beneath the polished exterior. Alexandra found someone who promised to protect her from the hardships of the world, someone who would ensure she never had to struggle again. Before long, they were inseparable. Rumors swirled around campus, with many speculating that Alexandra was just another conquest for Adrian, but she dismissed the whispers. Through tearful confessions about her parents' passing and her grandparents' unwavering support, she laid her heart bare. Adrian responded with empathy, surprising even himself. In her, he saw stability and kindness qualities absent from the cutthroat parties and business gatherings he frequented. By the time they both graduated, love had blossomed. On a starlit evening in the city, Adrian proposed. He took her to a secluded balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline, the wind tangling her hair. Dropping to one knee with an elegant diamond ring, one that once belonged to his mother, he asked Alexandra to be his wife. Overwhelmed by emotions, she said yes, sealing a promise of forever. And so they married. The ceremony was grand, held at the prestigious Field Museum, with flowers cascading down marble pillars and a guest list that included members of Chicago's elite. Adrian's father, Richard Marshall, spared no expense. He ensured that the wedding was the talk of the town for months to come. Yet amidst the gilded decorations and designer gowns, Alexandra's grandparents stood quietly, hearts bursting with pride and concern. They sensed Adrian's lifestyle might overshadow the marriage, but they hoped their granddaughter's steadfast nature could keep him grounded. In those early days, Adrian and Alexandra seemed invincible. Together, they moved into a luxurious penthouse overlooking the Chicago River. He launched his tech startup, Marshall Innovations, while she worked as a financial analyst at a reputable firm to support his dream. Their calendars brimmed with networking events, and they quickly became the power couple everyone envied. But the seeds of conflict were already taking root. Adrian's ambitions spiraled beyond the boundaries of reason. He spent late nights at exclusive lounges, rubbing elbows with venture capitalists and CEOs like Mark Cuban and Kevin O'Leary, names Alexandra recognized from television. Frequently, he boasted about how he'd someday surpass them all, how his success would be the envy of even icons like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. Alexandra, though proud of his drive, began to sense a shift in his values. The man who once treasured simple walks by the lake now craved the thrill of negotiations and big deals. She worried that love was taking a back seat to greed. Still, she tried to believe in him. After all, Adrian was her husband, and she felt indebted to the promise they shared to create a life of security, warmth, and happiness. Little did she know that this very promise would shatter under the weight of betrayal, leaving her to question everything she once held dear. Time has a funny way of warping reality when money enters the picture. Within 2 years of founding Marshall Innovations, Adrian secured lucrative contracts with tech giants looking for cutting-edge data solutions. Backed by wealthy investors, his company's valuation skyrocketed. Suddenly, Forbes and Bloomberg were featuring him as one of the most promising young entrepreneurs in the country. Adrian relished every moment: public speaking engagements, interviews, appearances at high-profile symposiums. He was everywhere. He no longer bothered with small talk about charitable causes or personal stories. Every word from his lips seemed tailored to pique the interest of prospective investors. Alexandra watched this transformation with a heavy heart. The man who once spent evenings tracing the shape of her face, whispering sweet nothings, was now consumed by board meetings and shareholder happiness. Alexandra's job as a financial analyst also progressed, though not at the meteoric pace of Adrian's success. She found comfort in her routine crunching numbers and researching market trends for her clients. She believed in work done quietly, meticulously, and ethically. Despite the glamour that surrounded Adrian, she chose a more grounded path. Her firm, Bradford and Associates, was run by a woman named Elaine Bradford, a compassionate mentor who recognized Alexandra's unique blend of intelligence and empathy. Over time, Alexandra climbed the ranks, from junior analyst to senior consultant, always maintaining a humility that endeared her to colleagues. At home, tension brewed like a pot about to boil over. Adrian spent more nights away, traveling to conferences or indulging in lavish parties with investors. Whenever Alexandra voiced her concerns, he brushed them aside, insisting this was all for their future. She tried to be supportive, but her intuition told her something was off. He acted like a man chasing a dream he didn't fully understand. Then came the night that would change the course of their marriage. It started with a harmless dinner at the house of Richard Marshall, Adrian's father, a man notorious for orchestrating business deals behind closed doors. Richard introduced Adrian to a potential investor named Lawrence Klein, an unassuming yet shrewd billionaire known for his aggressive tactics. During the dinner, Alexandra politely contributed to the conversation but was mostly sidelined. When she mentioned new market concerns or her thoughts on philanthropic responsibility, Richard and Lawrence exchanged dismissive glances. Adrian, too, seemed impatient whenever she spoke. After dinner, while Adrian and his father strategized over cognac in the study, Alexandra wandered into the spacious living room. There, she overheard Lawrence on a phone call. He spoke in hushed, urgent tones about a potential deal that might involve an unethical acquisition. Though she couldn't catch all the details, she gleaned enough to sense that Adrian might be roped into something morally ambiguous, if not downright illegal. Uneasy, she confronted Adrian later that night as they drove home. She begged him to reconsider partnering with Lawrence, to verify that no corners were being cut. Instead of taking her concerns to heart, Adrian exploded. He accused her of distrusting him, of not understanding how business worked. "This is how the world operates at this level," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Hurt and unsettled, Alexandra dropped the subject for the time being. In the weeks that followed, Adrian's unpredictability escalated. He'd come home at odd hours, reeking of alcohol, sometimes with lipstick on his collar. When Alexandra questioned him, he claimed it was business entertaining. He dismissed her worries about infidelity or moral compromise. "Stick to your spreadsheets," he snapped once. "Leave the real ambitions to me." The final straw came unexpectedly. One winter evening, Alexandra returned from work feeling nauseous and fatigued. Concerned about her health, she visited a clinic. To her astonishment, the doctor confirmed she was pregnant. Despite the tension between them, a flicker of joy ignited in her chest. She pictured a tiny baby, maybe a girl with Adrian's deep brown eyes, someone who might ground them both and rekindle the warmth they'd lost. With a hopeful heart, she rushed home to share the news. Adrian was in his study, eyes glued to his laptop screen. Before she could get the words out, he tore into her about a minor household issue. The argument escalated, unleashing pent-up frustrations and resentments. Through tears, she revealed her pregnancy, expecting the anger to dissolve. Instead, Adrian's face went pale with dread. He saw their unborn child not as a blessing, but as a complication that would derail his high-stakes deal with Lawrence Klein. That night, amid a storm raging outside, Adrian demanded she leave. He tossed her suitcase at her feet, eyes cold and lips set in a thin line. She pleaded, reminding him of their vows and the life they created. But he stood unyielding, pushing her out the door into the rain. "You're holding me back, Alexandra," he muttered. "I can't do this with you, or this child." Heart-pounding, drenched and pregnant, she found herself on the street. The penthouse lights flicked off, leaving her alone in the dark. In a single, brutal moment, Adrian had severed the bond that once seemed unbreakable. Now, Alexandra had to find a way forward for herself and for the baby she carried. The howling wind battered her frail body as she stumbled onto the sidewalk. Rain pelted against her cheeks, mingling with hot, bitter tears. Alexandra stood trembling, trying to comprehend the enormity of what just happened. The father of her child, the man who vowed to protect and cherish her, had turned his back so callously. With nowhere to go, she fumbled for her phone, praying that her grandparents would pick up, despite the late hour. They were too far away in Omaha to help immediately, but just hearing their voices could steady her. When her grandfather answered, his warm tone broke through her despair. She explained the situation in halting sobs, and he insisted she return home at once. But traveling in her state and at this hour felt impossible. She was terrified that stress might harm the baby. As fate would have it, her boss, Elaine Bradford, called soon after. Alexandra had missed an important meeting due to her doctor's appointment earlier that day, and Elaine wanted to check on her. When Alexandra confessed the night's events, Elaine was horrified. She urged Alexandra to come to her house, offering shelter and a promise that you're not alone, dear. You have people who care. Grasping at any lifeline, Alexandra accepted. She arrived at Elaine's cozy lakefront home an hour later, soaked to the bone. With no children of her own, Elaine lived a quiet life, dedicating herself to mentoring promising analysts like Alexandra. She opened her door with a compassionate smile, ushering Alexandra inside to a warm blanket and a cup of chamomile tea. Exhausted and overwhelmed, Alexandra finally let go, sobbing into Elaine's shoulder. She spent that night awake on a guest bed, mind churning with questions about her baby's future, her own survival, and how she would ever recover from this betrayal. The following morning, Elaine insisted on accompanying her to a hospital checkup to ensure the baby was safe. The doctors confirmed that despite the stress, the pregnancy remained stable. But they warned Alexandra to keep her stress levels down. Her health and the baby's depended on it. She was determined to do whatever it took. Even if Adrian had turned his back, she wouldn't do the same to their child. Still, practical concerns loomed large. Without Adrian's financial support, she couldn't afford their penthouse rent. She assumed he'd freeze their joint accounts as well. Summoning her courage, Alexandra contacted her bank. Sure enough, Adrian had preemptively blocked her from accessing any shared funds, claiming fraudulent activity. The betrayal stunned her, even though she half expected it. She had a modest personal savings, but it wouldn't last long, especially with the cost of prenatal care. The reality of her predicament sank in. She was alone and broke, responsible for a life that depended on her. Elaine, a fierce advocate for women's rights in business, helped Alexandra navigate the immediate crisis. First, she arranged for Alexandra to stay in a small apartment owned by Bradford and Associates. It was initially purchased to accommodate traveling consultants, but Elaine offered it rent-free for as long as Alexandra needed. Next, she facilitated legal counsel, introducing Alexandra to her own attorney, Grace Liu, a sharp-minded professional experienced in family law. Together, they began to outline a plan for child support, though Alexandra knew Adrian would fight it tooth and nail. Sitting in that cramped but safe apartment, with the hum of Chicago traffic outside the window, Alexandra alternated between sorrow, fury, and a growing sense of resolve. She realized her old life was gone. The illusions of love and a fairy-tale marriage had evaporated, leaving only stark reality. A child who would come into this world needing more than heartbreak. News of their separation spread quickly, fueled by social media posts from Adrian's lavish parties and whispered gossip at business events. Some empathized with Alexandra, but many sided with Adrian, who portrayed himself as a victim of a gold-digging wife. He fed tabloid rumors that she was attempting to sabotage his deals. After all, who would question the word of a rising tech mogul worth millions? Every mention of these rumors cut Alexandra deeply, but she found an unexpected pillar of support in her colleagues at Bradford and Associates. Even casual acquaintances reached out, reminding her that the truth would prevail. Elaine discreetly started looking for ways to shield Alexandra from stress at work, ensuring her schedule was flexible for doctor's appointments. For her part, Alexandra poured her heart into the job, determined to maintain an identity beyond the wronged wife. She needed her career now more than ever. Days stretched into weeks, then months. Each sonogram visit revealed new details about the baby, a steady heartbeat, tiny limbs, even the first fluttering movements that filled Alexandra with awe. She found solace in the notion that this child would be her salvation, the reason to keep pushing forward. Despite exhaustion and morning sickness, she steadily advanced at work, impressing clients with her no-nonsense financial analysis and inherent kindness. Behind the scenes, Grace Liu fought tirelessly for Alexandra's legal rights. But Adrian, with his vast resources, delayed proceedings at every turn. He filed countersuits alleging that Alexandra had tried to entrap him. He questioned the paternity of the child, demanding expensive tests and draining Alexandra's energy. Yet she refused to be intimidated. She had no illusions left about the man she once loved, and she vowed to stand firm. Every night she reflected on her journey. Memories of that first kiss on the University of Chicago quad contrasted painfully with her current reality, yet she clung to a single truth: she was still standing. Yes, she was betrayed, abandoned, and vilified in the press. But she was alive, forging a path for herself and her unborn child. If Adrian thought he'd destroyed her, he was sorely mistaken. The turning point came one chilly morning during her second trimester. Alexandra was seated at her makeshift desk in the small apartment, sifting through spreadsheets for a crucial client pitch. She paused, feeling a sharp jolt within her belly, the baby kicking for the first time. Tears of wonder filled her eyes. That tiny movement was like an electric current, igniting her spirit, reminding her of the life she was fighting for. Around that time, Elaine Bradford handed Alexandra a high-profile client, a subsidiary of the philanthropic organization run by billionaire Bill Gates. Though small in revenue, it was significant in stature, focusing on community development projects in low-income neighborhoods. If Alexandra could handle this account successfully, it could open doors to more high-paying contracts and solidify her position as a lead consultant. She tackled the project with unwavering determination. Over weekends, she visited local communities earmarked for development, speaking to residents to understand their needs. She compiled meticulous reports that detailed not just the financial feasibility, but the ethical implications of each investment. Her approach resonated deeply with the philanthropic arm of the Gates organization. They were impressed by her empathy-driven, detailed methodology. Word of Alexandra's outstanding performance spread within Bradford and Associates. Elaine, who'd always believed in her potential, initiated conversations about fast-tracking Alexandra to a director-level position. "You've got what it takes," Elaine told her. "Your circumstances might be difficult, but your talent is undeniable. We need more leaders like you." Buoyed by this praise, Alexandra let herself dream of a brighter future, one where she could provide comfortably for her child without relying on Adrian's sullied fortune. Simultaneously, Grace Liu had a breakthrough in the legal battle. She discovered that Adrian had neglected to formalize certain corporate structures in his haste to seal deals. He also had overlooked key details in their prenuptial agreement clauses that could secure substantial financial support for Alexandra and the baby. This was the first glimmer of hope in a fight that seemed rigged. Though the process would still be tedious, Grace was confident they had a much stronger case now. For the first time since being cast out, Alexandra felt the scales of justice might tip in her favor. In a twist of irony, as Alexandra's professional life soared, Adrian's public image began to tarnish. Rumors swirled of unethical dealings, especially with Lawrence Klein's aggressive acquisitions. Some whisperers claimed Marshall Innovations was involved in data privacy breaches, overshadowing the early praise for its technological breakthroughs. The once lionized Adrian Marshall now faced wary investors who wondered if he had overextended the company. He tried to distract the public with lavish events and outrageous PR stunts, but cracks in his empire were forming. Through all this, Alexandra maintained a quiet resolve. She chose not to gloat over Adrian's troubles. She had more pressing matters: her child's well-being. Every day, she willed herself to stay strong, focusing on generating enough savings to cover prenatal and future childcare expenses. She spent nights reading about single motherhood, taking in advice from forums and local support groups. Strangers who heard her story admired her tenacity, even if they didn't know the full extent of the betrayal. But fate had more in store. One crisp afternoon, Elaine invited her to a business luncheon at the Drake Hotel. The guest speaker was none other than Robert Herjavec, the tech mogul and investor who had built his fortune through cybersecurity ventures. While the lunch was primarily a networking event, Alexandra's background made her an ideal fit to engage with a speaker of Robert's caliber. Perhaps, Elaine hinted, they could land additional clients or even investors for Bradford and Associates. Alexandra arrived, nerves buzzing. She tried to ignore the stares from some in the crowd, people who recognized her as Adrian Marshall's disgraced wife. Steadfast, she took her seat, pen at the ready to jot down notes on Robert's keynote address. His talk emphasized innovation guided by ethics, a principle Alexandra had come to appreciate deeply. She listened intently, drawing inspiration from his journey of rising from adversity to become a leading figure in cybersecurity. After the luncheon, Elaine deftly introduced Alexandra to Robert, praising her as one of Bradford and Associates' most promising minds. To Alexandra's surprise, Robert was familiar with Adrian, though he'd never done business with him. He'd heard the rumors swirling around Marshall Innovations and expressed concern about the future of the company. Cautiously, Alexandra explained that she once had insights into the business, but was no longer affiliated. Robert, perceptive as he was, sensed a deeper story. He offered his business card, suggesting they continue the conversation in a more private setting. Days later, Alexandra found herself in Robert's sleek downtown office. The space, overlooking Lake Michigan, was a testament to modern minimalism, clean lines, smart technology, and a subtle air of calm. Robert cut to the chase. "I've heard conflicting accounts about your ex-husband's firm. I prefer facts over rumors. If you can provide clarity, it might help me gauge if there's an opportunity either to partner or to steer clear." Alexandra hesitated. She had a legal obligation not to disclose certain proprietary information from her time with Adrian, but she could speak in broad strokes about the company's culture and the red flags she'd observed. She mentioned the ethical lines Adrian seemed willing to cross, albeit without incriminating specifics. Robert listened carefully. After she finished, he asked about her own aspirations, particularly given her predicament. For a moment, Alexandra felt a wave of vulnerability, but she took a breath and recounted her journey, from being thrown out on a stormy night to rebuilding her life step by step. She spoke not just about her professional growth, but her desire to make a meaningful impact, especially now that she was bringing a child into the world. Robert was visibly moved. He admired her grit and honesty. Before she left, he extended a personal offer. "If there's ever a collaboration or investment opportunity that aligns with your values and skill set, I'm open to discussing it." That meeting didn't magically solve Alexandra's problems. She still had legal battles, a stressful pregnancy, and the shadow of Adrian's betrayal. But it marked the emergence of a network of allies in high places, people who saw in her something far more valuable than a tragic backstory. They saw potential, fortitude, and an unwavering moral compass. The third trimester brought physical challenges for Alexandra: swollen feet, backaches, and bouts of insomnia. But each day also brought deeper love for the life she carried. She prepared a small nursery corner in her apartment, painting whimsical clouds on the walls. Whenever fatigue or anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, she pictured holding her child, vowing to shower them with unconditional love, something she never wanted them to question. In the midst of these personal milestones, her professional life continued to flourish. She successfully concluded the Gates Foundation project, earning commendations from key stakeholders. Elaine announced that Alexandra would be promoted to Director of Ethical Finance Initiatives, a role designed to attract socially responsible investments. The position came with a substantial raise, providing a financial buffer for motherhood. Tears of gratitude welled in Alexandra's eyes when Elaine shared the news. For the first time since her marriage imploded, she felt genuinely empowered to chart her course. Meanwhile, Adrian's empire wavered. A scandal erupted when a whistleblower within Marshall Innovations revealed questionable data practices apparently sanctioned by Adrian himself. Investors panicked, stock prices plunged, and the media had a field day. Adrian denied all allegations, blaming rogue employees. Yet the damage to his reputation was severe. As journalists dug deeper, they uncovered the lavish lifestyle he funded through the company's coffers. The carefully curated image of a visionary entrepreneur cracked, revealing something far more sinister. Despite the chaos, Adrian refused to settle the divorce or custody case. He contested every motion, ignoring Alexandra's pleas for a straightforward resolution. In quiet moments, Alexandra wondered how she ever loved a man who cared so little for his own child. But there was no turning back. Her baby deserved peace, not a father who viewed them as a hindrance. The child's arrival came with dramatic flair, as though it couldn't help but reflect Alexandra's tumultuous life. On a snowy January evening, just as another legal hearing was scheduled for the following week, Alexandra felt her first contractions. Alone in her apartment, she steadied herself, recalling her birthing class techniques, breathing in, breathing out, but soon realized she needed medical assistance. She called Elaine, who rushed over in record time. Together, they headed to the hospital as the Chicago skyline glowed under a gentle snowfall. Hours stretched into a blur of pain and determination. Doctors and nurses offered support, but the most comforting presence was Elaine, who held Alexandra's hand, whispering words of encouragement. Finally, just before dawn, a baby girl was born. Her cries pierced the sterile room, announcing her spirited arrival. In that instant, Alexandra felt a surge of love so powerful it erased every wound inflicted by Adrian's betrayal. She named her daughter Claire Elizabeth Bennett, honoring the mother who had died when Alexandra was young. Cradling Claire against her chest, Alexandra vowed, "I will give you the life you deserve, little one." Exhausted yet euphoric, she gazed upon her miracle tiny fingers, bright eyes that blinked curiously at the world. It was a new beginning, a life unburdened by the sins of the father. Weeks of maternity leave followed. Alexandra savored every moment with Claire, from midnight feedings to gentle lullabies. Though money was tighter than ever, medical bills piled up. She refused to let anxiety overshadow her baby's first days. Elaine arranged for a part-time nanny, so Alexandra could rest and plan her eventual return to work. Friends and colleagues pitched in with meals and baby items, a testament to the community Alexandra had built through kindness and respect. Still, the legal battles loomed. Grace Liu pressed for a DNA test, which Adrian begrudgingly agreed to. The test, of course, confirmed Claire's paternity, stripping Adrian of one more excuse. Yet he persisted in his cruelty, claiming that any child support should be minimal, given Alexandra's sizable salary. In truth, she was far from wealthy. But she recognized that the old illusions of relying on Adrian for anything were gone. She'd fight for what Claire deserved, not out of greed, but principle. Outside the courtroom, Chicago's business sphere buzzed with speculation that Marshall Innovations was on the verge of collapse. Lawsuits for breach of privacy and ethics violations stacked up. Investors withdrew en masse, and Lawrence Klein dissolved his partnership with Adrian, citing irreconcilable differences. The once mighty Adrian Marshall was now a pariah, scrambling to salvage what remained of his empire. Amid this downfall, a seed of an idea took root in Alexandra's mind. A bold, unthinkable plan that might secure Claire's future, settle old debts, and prove a final point. Adrian Marshall's cruelty wouldn't define her. She shared it with Elaine and Grace, who listened intently, their expressions shifting from shock to cautious excitement. If they pulled it off, it would be the ultimate twist of fate, a wife left on the streets, returning to claim the empire that had caused her such anguish. In the weeks that followed, Alexandra juggled single motherhood, her new directorial role, and clandestine meetings with Elaine and Grace. The plan? Acquire Marshall Innovations through a strategic takeover, turning the tables on Adrian in a high-stakes move that no one would expect, especially from the very woman he discarded. It started with financial analysis. Alexandra combed through every publicly available document about Marshall Innovations, cross-referencing it with insider knowledge she'd gleaned during her marriage. She identified the company's vulnerabilities, lawsuits, a hemorrhaging investor base, and a damaged reputation. Buying the company would be risky, but it was also ripe for a bargain. Next, they needed investors. Elaine leveraged her network, quietly introducing Alexandra to ethical financiers who believed in her track record. Some had even collaborated with her on philanthropic ventures. Others came from Robert Herjavec's circle, intrigued by the possibility of turning Marshall Innovations into a reformed tech firm with transparent data practices. Funds started to gather, forming a coalition of backers who trusted Alexandra's leadership and vision. Of course, the biggest question remained: why would they want to acquire a tarnished brand? Alexandra's answer was simple: potential. Despite its ethical failures, Marshall Innovations possessed groundbreaking technology. If stripped of its corrupt leadership and refocused on legitimate practices, it could be a powerhouse for good. She envisioned using the tech to aid community development, secure data for non-profits, and offer transparent, customer-focused solutions, a stark departure from Adrian's approach. Grace Liu advised caution. Any misstep could sink the entire plan or invite legal repercussions if they appeared to be using privileged marital information. But Alexandra had no intention of breaking the law. She only used knowledge gleaned from public disclosures and personal experiences predating the meltdown. Step by step, they structured a holding company, Bennett Solutions, under which they'd attempt the acquisition. It felt surreal, but the momentum was unstoppable. As negotiations heated up, Alexandra faced an unexpected emotional hurdle. Part of her bristled at the idea of returning to anything connected to Adrian, as though she was tethering herself to the scene of her greatest trauma. Was it healthy to invest so much energy into something that symbolized betrayal? She wrestled with these doubts late at night, rocking Claire to sleep, whispering to her daughter about the future. Ultimately, she pressed on, guided by a fierce desire to reclaim her narrative and transform tragedy into empowerment. With every step, Adrian remained oblivious. He was too busy firefighting the daily onslaught of lawsuits and negative press. He assumed Alexandra's focus was solely on their custody and divorce battles, never suspecting she aimed to take his company. The irony was deliciously poetic. The man who once boasted about his cunning in business couldn't see the stealth operation unfolding before his eyes. As the plan advanced, Alexandra also took pains to ensure her emotional well-being. Through therapy sessions, she came to understand that her ambition wasn't rooted in vengeance alone. It was about forging a better world for Claire. She wasn't out to destroy Adrian. Life was already doing that. She wanted to build something meaningful from the rubble he'd left behind. By the time Claire was 6 months old, the pieces were in place. Bennett Solutions had quietly amassed enough capital to present a serious offer for Marshall Innovations. Their approach would be simple yet aggressive: offer a lifeline to a sinking ship, promising to honor essential operations and keep the workforce largely intact. The only stipulation? Adrian Marshall would be removed from any position of authority permanently. The day they decided to submit the proposal, Alexandra stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the cuffs of her blazer. She felt a swirl of nerves, recalling the stormy night Adrian threw her out, pregnant and alone. She glanced at Claire, contently babbling in her crib. Her heart swelled with love and resolve. It was time to face her past head-on. The tension in the air was thick as Alexandra stood in the lobby of Marshall Innovations' towering headquarters, once a symbol of her husband's ambition, and now the battleground of her quiet revenge. The marble floors gleamed under her heels as she walked through the lobby with steady poise, every click echoing her transformation from the pregnant woman once left on the street to a businesswoman powerful enough to buy the very empire that cast her out. She wore a dark navy suit tailored to perfection, her long hair pinned back in a sleek bun, her expression unreadable. Inside her briefcase were the acquisition documents that would forever change the course of her life and Adrian's. Elaine Bradford walked beside her, equally composed, while two investors followed behind, both eager to finalize the transaction that had been brewing quietly for months. Alexandra could feel her heart pounding beneath her ribcage, not from fear, but from anticipation. This was it. Years of pain, struggle, and silent rebuilding had brought her to this moment. They entered the 31-floor boardroom, glass walls, modern furnishings, and a panoramic view of downtown Chicago. The table was already occupied by Adrian and his remaining senior staff. He sat at the head, his posture rigid, his expensive grey suit doing little to hide the storm raging behind his eyes. When he looked up and saw her walk in, he froze. For a moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the low hum of the city outside. Then his lips curled into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Well, isn't this poetic?" he said slowly, voice laced with venom. "You've come to gloat, Alexandra?" She didn't flinch. "I've come to present a legitimate acquisition offer. Nothing more, nothing less. You think this is a game?" Adrian barked, standing. "This is my company. You think just because you found a few investors and played dress-up in a suit, you can walk in here and take what I built?" One of the investors beside Alexandra, an older man with silver hair named Peter Lang, cleared his throat. "Mr. Marshall, this is a formal proposal backed by due diligence and capital. If you wish to discuss it seriously, we suggest you take your seat." Adrian's eyes narrowed, but he slowly sat back down. Around him, several board members looked visibly uncomfortable. They had watched Adrian's empire spiral downward over the past year, investors pulling out, lawsuits stacking up, the media painting him as the villain of his own success story. Now, faced with insolvency, even his most loyal executives were desperate for a lifeline. Alexandra placed a thick folder on the table and slid it forward. "This is the offer," she said clearly. Bennett Solutions proposes to acquire Marshall Innovations in full, absorbing its assets and liabilities. We will restructure the leadership, implement an ethics and compliance committee, and shift focus to transparent, socially responsible tech development. Adrian scoffed. "Let me guess. And I step aside while you play CEO with my legacy?" She met his gaze. "Correct. The offer is contingent on your full and permanent removal from any leadership, advisory, or equity holding positions. You'll have no role in this company moving forward." Adrian's face flushed red, and for a moment Alexandra wondered if he might flip the entire table. "You don't have the leverage," he spat. "You don't know what it's like to run a company like this. You're a consultant with a vendetta." "No," she said quietly, "I'm a survivor, a mother, and someone who's spent every day since you threw me out, learning how to do better than you ever could." The room fell silent. Elaine stepped in, her voice calm but authoritative. "Marshall Innovations is on the brink of collapse, Adrian. You're hemorrhaging cash, you've burned every meaningful bridge in the industry, and you're facing investigations that could bury this place for good. This isn't about revenge, it's about survival." One of the board members, a balding man named Thomas Greer, adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Marshall, with all due respect, the board is required to consider any serious proposal that may serve the interests of the shareholders." "Miss." Bennett's offer may be the only one that ensures continued operations and job preservation. Adrian stood again, rage trembling through his body. So you'd all rather hand the keys of my company to her than stand by me? You stopped leading a long time ago, Thomas replied solemnly. What you've built is barely standing. Adrian looked around the room, seeking loyalty, but found only blank stares and guarded expressions. Alexandra remained still, composed, but her mind flashed back to the stormy night when he shoved her out the door, suitcase in hand, belly swollen with their child. The humiliation, the fear, the raw betrayal. And now, this. I should have known, Adrian muttered. All this time, you were just waiting to get back at me. I wasn't waiting, Alexandra replied coolly. I was rebuilding. For me. For Claire, and for everyone you hurt while chasing power. He staggered back slightly at the sound of his daughter's name. His lips parted, but he said nothing. For once, he had no comeback, no slick retort to hide behind. Peter Lang leaned forward, resting his hands on the folder. The board will convene in 72 hours to vote on the proposal. We expect a formal response before then. If you attempt to obstruct the vote or move assets out of reach, we will pursue legal action. Adrian sat down slowly, jaw clenched, refusing to look at Alexandra. The meeting adjourned with quiet murmurs as Alexandra and her team stood to leave. As she walked past Adrian, she paused briefly. You once told me I was holding you back, she said, voice soft but unshaking. Turns out you were holding yourself back. She didn't wait for a response. She stepped out of the boardroom into the corridor, where sunlight poured in through the windows. For the first time in years, she felt weightless. Adrian tried everything to sabotage the deal. He spread rumors that Bennett Solutions was underfunded and incompetent, hoping to scare the board. He even attempted to file an injunction claiming conflict of interest because Alexandra had once been his spouse. But the courts found no merit in his complaints. When the board reconvened, they voted 7-1 in favor of accepting Bennett Solutions' acquisition offer. The sole dissenting vote was Adrian's, of course, but it held no weight. Within hours, legal documents were signed. Marshall Innovations officially became a subsidiary of Bennett Solutions. Adrian was offered a token severance package, one that paled in comparison to his previous net worth on the condition he relinquish any further claims. That evening, alone in his penthouse, the same one he once shared with Alexandra, Adrian downed glass after glass of whiskey. The city lights sparkled below, indifferent to his downfall. He stared at the final contract, the words blurring. How had it come to this? Hubris and greed had led him to treat the woman he once loved like disposable trash, and now he paid the ultimate price. Alexandra, on the other hand, celebrated quietly. After signing the final documents, she left the boardroom and drove to a small Italian restaurant where Elaine and Grace were waiting. They toasted with sparkling water. Alexandra had sworn off alcohol while nursing Claire, exchanging relieved smiles. The surreal reality sank in. She was now in control of the very empire that once symbolized her greatest pain. Yet, it wasn't all roses and triumph. The real work lay ahead. Marshall Innovations needed a complete overhaul to recover from the lawsuits, secure new clients, and rebuild trust in the marketplace. Alexandra spent countless hours strategizing with her new executive team, many of whom were relieved to be free of Adrian's toxic leadership. They rolled out policies for ethical data handling, implemented transparent consumer agreements, and established philanthropic partnerships. It was a gargantuan task, but each step felt like healing for the company and for Alexandra herself. Meanwhile, the divorce and custody case reached its final stage. Grace Liu secured a fair child support arrangement, though Adrian's diminished finances meant it wasn't the windfall it could have been. Alexandra didn't mind. She cared more about ensuring Adrian held some responsibility for Claire, even if only financial. As for visitation rights, Adrian didn't seem eager to be a father. He'd appear at a few court-ordered sessions, always aloof, always resentful. Claire was too young to understand the coldness in his demeanor, but Alexandra braced herself for difficult conversations in the future. Despite the lingering bitterness, Alexandra refused to let negativity consume her. She had a company to run, a daughter to raise, and a life to live fully. Each morning she greeted Claire with a gentle kiss, inhaling the sweet scent of baby shampoo, reminding herself how far she'd come from that stormy night on the street. Love, not hatred, propelled her forward. Within a year, the transformation of Marshall Innovations under Bennett Solutions was nothing short of remarkable. Lawsuits were settled, often with Alexandra insisting on community service or charitable donations as part of the agreement. She formed a strategic partnership with Robert Herjavec's firm to bolster cybersecurity measures, ensuring that data abuse would never again plague the company. Investors returned cautiously at first, but momentum built as the press spotlighted the ethical renaissance Alexandra was spearheading. She also launched a philanthropic arm, Claire's Foundation, named after her daughter, aimed at helping pregnant women in vulnerable circumstances. The foundation offered shelter, job training, and educational opportunities, ensuring no woman would be left on the street the way Alexandra once was. This initiative garnered widespread praise, distinguishing Bennett Solutions as a unique player in the tech world, one that believed in merging profits with compassion. As the company's fortunes rose, so did Alexandra's. Media outlets clamored for interviews with the real-life Phoenix, the woman who had turned personal tragedy into corporate triumph. She graced the covers of business magazines and delivered keynote addresses at tech summits, sharing her story with a tone that was both humble and inspiring. She refused to speak ill of Adrian publicly, focusing instead on the lessons learned about resilience, ethics, and the power of second chances. Behind the scenes, Alexandra remained grounded. She spent evenings reading to Claire, relishing simple moments of motherhood, a soft laugh, tiny footsteps, the first mumbled words. She visited her grandparents in Omaha whenever she could, ensuring Claire knew the family values that shaped Alexandra's own spirit. And she kept Elaine close, grateful for the mentor who became a friend and ally in her darkest hour. Adrian, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Rumor had it he fled Chicago to avoid the constant reminders of his ruined empire. A few tabloids published photos of him in Las Vegas, partying with questionable acquaintances, but even the paparazzi eventually lost interest in his fall from grace. For Alexandra, he was a closed chapter, a man whose lessons she wouldn't forget, but whose presence no longer dictated her life. Years passed. Claire grew into a bright, curious child, full of questions about the world. Alexandra guided her with warmth and honesty, eventually explaining, in age-appropriate terms, why her father wasn't a big part of their lives. The little girl listened, solemn but accepting. She had a mother who adored her, a circle of supportive friends, and a sense of security many children never know. Bennett Solutions continued to evolve, branching into green technology and social impact initiatives. It became a model for responsible entrepreneurship, attracting top talent who believed in making a difference. Whenever Alexandra visited a new development project or community outreach center, she felt a deep pride that transcended financial success. She was living proof that from darkness could emerge brilliance, from betrayal a renewed sense of purpose. One day, an envelope arrived at Alexandra's office. Inside was a handwritten note from Adrian, postmarked from somewhere in Europe. The scrawled lines were a confusing mix of apology and self-justification. He admitted he had acted out of fear and greed, acknowledged she'd proven him wrong about everything, and expressed some regret he'd never known Claire. Alexandra read it with an odd sense of detachment. She folded it away, not quite sure whether to respond. Ultimately, she chose silence. Some ghosts were best left in the past. She had a future to build, one defined not by anger, but by hope and integrity. And so, from the heartbreak of a stormy night on a Chicago sidewalk, rose a powerful testament to resilience and grace. Alexandra Bennett refused to let betrayal define her. Through determination, moral leadership, and a dash of poetic justice, she transformed the company that once symbolized her deepest pain into a beacon of ethical innovation. Today, Bennett Solutions and Claire's Foundation stand as tributes to hope, reminding us all that even the darkest chapters can birth the brightest legacies. Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary journey of love, loss, and ultimate triumph. If Alexandra's story has inspired you, please show your support like this video, share it with friends who need a beacon of hope, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting tales of real-life drama and redemption. Your engagement helps us continue sharing stories that encourage, motivate, and transform lives.